Peace and blessings. This is Satori, and we're going to get into part 8 of this truth series. And the central thought is still dealing with truth is you. So as always, to keep in focus is that our hearts are the carriers of truth. The truth is to exist within you. You shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. And God desires the truth to be within on the inward parts. So then truth is you. In part 7 we dealt with paradoxes. And we defined paradox. We basically defined it as anything that is a self-contradiction. So anything that's self-contradictory is a paradox. So any decisions that we make that's against our own self-interest, the interest we're talking about in terms of elevating and building us, is identified as a paradox. So today I want to go a little bit deeper into paradox before we go further in the series, so we can kind of really get a good grasp and a good understanding of what a paradox is. All right. So paradoxa, there's a word for paradox. It comes from the word paradoxa, and if you split this word in half, and you look at the prefix and the suffix of it, look at the word para, P-A-R-A, that means beyond. If you look at the word doxa, D-O-X-A, that means opinion. And so you combine those words together, you're talking about beyond opinion. Now, a paradox, so we also can add on the definition, and we can say a paradox is a reality or interest that is beyond our own held opinions. All right? Or we can basically say that a paradox is a conflict of interest. It's a conflict of realities. It's a conflict of opinions. Now, the interesting word that really jumps out in this definition is opinion. Now, neutrally speaking, in an opinion, there's nothing wrong with an opinion. We all have opinions. Because the word opinion within itself simply means a held viewpoint. We all have viewpoints. That means we all have opinions. But now, paradoxically speaking, opinion has a different meaning. And there's an interesting word that's pronounced saif, which is spelled C-A-I-P-H. And it defines opinion as an idea that causes us to disbranch from self-growth. So basically any idea that causes us or shifts us from self-growth. Then also, saif also means ideas that will cause us to have, ideas that will cause us to be in a state of doubt. So paradoxically speaking, an opinion in this type of manner is what drives a paradox, which drives self-contradiction. And the self-contradiction is attached to the ideas that causes us to disbranch from self-growth. Now, and so we're talking about disbranch from self-growth, that means our decision-making and how we make decisions should bring self-affirmation. Because if there's self-contradiction, that means there's self-affirmation because it's taking you away from something. So the opinion takes you away from self-affirmation. And that's how we also can tell that a paradox exists. All right? And so when we talk about self-affirmation, we're also talking about self-image. And so we talk about self-image, we're talking about how we view ourselves. All right? So when we talk about self-image, then we have to, let's look at life, and we have to ask ourselves the question, what is our point of view about relationships? What is our point of view about money? What is our point of view about politics? What is our point of view about our domestic structure, our domestic arrangement? What is our point of view about spirituality? What's our point of view about community? What's our point of view about sexuality? All these areas I just mentioned is important because these areas affect our lives, and we make decisions in each of these different areas. And if we have untruths, that means that we're going to make indecisions. And if we make indecisions, that means our decision making is going to cause us to get involved in things that's against our own interests. And keep in mind that, our decision making should bring harmony and peace and clarity for us. It shouldn't bring confusion or ambiguity or anything of that type of sort. All right? So we have to sit back and look at if our relationships, basically any decision we make should be building up our esteem, because remember, it's self-affirmation. So we're talking about self-affirmation, we're talking about building our own esteem. So when we have our opinions and our personal viewpoints should build our esteem. So what is our decision making in our relationships? It's measured in how it builds our esteem. If it doesn't build our esteem, that means a paradox exists. What is our viewpoints about money? Because if we don't use money to build our esteem, that means that a paradox exists. All right. What is our viewpoint about our domestic arrangement or structure? What is our view about that? You know what I'm saying? Because that will determine. I mean, if it doesn't build us up, then there's a paradox that exists. Spiritually, communally speaking, and also sexually. So our sexual activity, if the decision that we make doesn't build up our esteem, that means a paradox exists. Well, how does a paradox exist? Because we talked about it brings in self-doubt. And we talk about saif in terms of a reference to opinion. So if there's no harmony, no flow in our decision making, and it's not building up our esteem, that means that there's a state of doubt somewhere. And that state of doubt also allows us to understand that there is a paradox that exists. All right? And so why does that paradox exist? Because there's self-contradiction. Because we're making decisions against ourselves. All right? So the question I ask myself and I'll ask is, how can we decipher, or how can we tell when a paradoxical opinion exists? It's really simple. We measure it by if the opinion either builds our self-esteem or if it lowers our self-esteem. So we can determine, we can decipher if we have a paradoxical type of opinion, if it builds our self-esteem or if it lowers our self-esteem. And keep in mind, the key word is self. Because that's the core of it all. Because truth begins with you. Truth is within you. All right? Before I close, I want to point out how we can tell if we're in a paradoxical type of environment. Paradoxical environments are highly competitive. Paradoxical environments you see a lot of debate. It breeds a lot of environments of debate. We can look at politics. A lot of times, a lot of people feel that we don't find truth in politics, probably because it's an environment of debate, which means it points to it's paradoxical. All right, paradoxical environments can be identified by seeing a lot of discord. It's hard for people to really harmonize. We can decipher, we can tell, we can discern a paradoxical environment by seeing combative attitudes or combative environments. We could take it to a broader scale, to a national level. You got a warmongering type of nation or countries that are more prone to go to war. That means there's paradoxes that exist. All right. Then also last, another area to tell if we're in a paradoxical environment, if it's mentally draining or mentally, it just takes a lot of your mental energy. And and just on a lighter note, a lot of times a lot of us work, and a lot of times a lot of people will say our jobs are mentally straining. Well, if you feel like your job is mentally straining, that means there's a lot of paradoxes that exist. That means you're in a paradoxical environment. All right. So just definitely keep that in mind to understand what a paradox is. Paradox is self-contradiction, but paradox is also a conflict of interest. It's also a conflict of reality, a conflict of opinions. And when we talk about opinions, we're talking about Paradox are existed because we are ingesting ideas that cause us to just branch from our own self-growth, which then affects our decision making to make decisions against ourselves, against our own interests. And when we recognize that, that means that there's a paradox that exists. So I'll leave you with that note about paradoxes. We'll be back at this thing again. We'll be in part 9. I want to greet you in love and light. Be blessed. One love. We'll be back at this again.